Well, it will take India's $4 billion food delivery sector at least 12 months to return to pre-COVID levels across most top metros and maybe even longer in smaller towns and cities. According to a survey by research firm Redseer, the nationwide lockdown created new challenges for food delivery platforms Swiggy and Zomato as restaurants had to shutter down pretty much across the country and the delivery workforce vanished. In fact, today, Swiggy has only about 25 to 40% of its restaurants functional in cities where food delivery is allowed, and Zomato is working with 30 to 35% of the restaurants on its platform. But it's not just about supply. Even demand has taken a big hit as people are wary about safety and hygiene of both delivery partners and kitchens. While a large-scale outreach program assuring customers about safety measures and hygiene standards, along with the expansion of services to include the delivery of groceries, has helped business revive in the last fortnight, it is still nowhere near the 3 million orders a day that these platforms were clocking before the country went into a lockdown. Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan, and joining me today are the two big boys of the delivery business, Gaurav Gupta, the founder and CEO at Zomato, and Vivek Sundar, the CEO at Swiggy. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us here on the program. Gaurav, let me start by asking you, I would imagine the first few days were very, very chaotic. It was the same story across different sectors. Have things stabilized now? How many orders are you being able to complete in a day? What's the situation like as far as getting the workforce back on the road?
Hi, Shireen. So, of course, the first 2 weeks, I would say, first 1 or 2 weeks of lockdown were difficult for everyone. I think all of us were trying to get an understanding of what can operate, how it can operate across multiple cities. But I must say, after the first couple of weeks, things have sorted out quite a bit. Thanks to the authorities who've been actually being out there, making sure it's possible. From a workforce perspective, of course, as we look at orders right now, orders are trending at around 30% of what we used to have earlier. And we would see a similar number of delivery partners also being out there and delivering food to users right now. So, of course, it will take time for all of this to come back. But I think what is important is that all the different stakeholders in this ecosystem are coming together just to make sure that the food that is being delivered, wherever it is essential, or even grocery, wherever it's essential, is actually safe and hygienic. And again, multiple parts of the value chain have different measures implemented in them. And week on week, the idea is to just keep improving those.
Okay, Vivek, let me first put that question to you. How many cities are you operational in? What is the situation as far as the workforce is concerned? And what have you been able to do in terms of ensuring that you're COVID-proofing the business, so to speak, contactless delivery, temperature screening, and so on and so forth? What have been the operational levers that you've had to put into place?
Good evening, Shireen. Nice to be on your show. So starting with the number of cities, which is the first question you asked, we were in 500 plus cities before the lockdown. And as we speak, about 200 are still shut. And we're obviously operating with a skeletal fleet in the 300 that we're operating. That's the bad news. But the good news is that we are deemed to be essential services because we are ensuring that consumers are able to stay at home and in a safe manner being able to get essentials into their homes. So we have obviously got food deliveries on in most of these cities, but what is great is due to a demand from consumers as well as authorities, we've been able to start grocery services, connecting the neighborhood Kirana store last mile to the consumer's home. And we're able to do that in the same Swiggy speed that consumers are used to. So that's a ray of light for us that we're actually able to operate.
Yes, so the good news is that you have started to operate. The bad news is that you're operating in 200 cities versus the 500 that you were operating in pre-lockdown. But, I want to understand from the two of you of what the execution challenge has really been like. And Gaurav, let me start by asking you, multiple agencies that you've had to coordinate with, multiple bodies that you've had to deal with, some states requiring passes, some having e-passes, back and forth, relaxations coming in, then relaxations being withdrawn. Just explain to me what it's meant on the back end to just be up and running.
So, Shireen, as I said, I think it, of course, has meant a lot of coordination. And I think all of us should remember that this is unprecedented. None of us have ever thought about it. It's like somebody just put a pause button on everything, right? So nobody's imagined what it would look like. So I think the first 2 weeks were more like that. I would say after that, I think there was much more clarity in how this could be done. Of course, there was effort involved in getting the delivery partners out there with the regular passes that they needed and so on and so forth. But I think it's been more streamlined. I would say the bigger challenge in front of all of us is how do we make sure that this food that is being delivered across the value chain is still safe? And as I said, for example, starting from the user, right? Making sure contactless delivery is implemented and users understand the need for that.
Yeah.
Then making sure the riders do the normal practices that they had to do every day. And for example, self-regulations. There's something like self-regulation that we've done where they have to follow those practices before they can log on to the app. And there are multiple checks done during the day to make sure they're following those practices. And then it, of course, comes back to the restaurant partners where we've actually enabled a self-regulation on their part as well to make sure there's hand sanitization happening, there is sanitization of the kitchens happening, and all the basic measures that they need to take in terms of temperature checks, and trying to make sure that this whole, like all different parts and each entity within this value chain are following this on a daily basis has been one of the biggest challenges. But it's also, if you look back in the last 4-6 weeks, it's actually also gratifying to see that we're able to do that. And every week, we're able to implement more and more of these measures or get more and more compliance on these measures as we speak right now.
Okay. Vivek, on that point, and I would imagine that, you know, like others, we would also expect that Swiggy and Zomato are also pushing the adoption of the Arogya Setu app, which is something that the government has virtually said that you need to do. So has that already happened? And how are you ensuring that there is compliance? I mean, you can put those checks and balances and those guardrails in place, but how do you ensure that there is compliance?
So to start with, there is only a skeleton or a small section of the fleet that is operating. Many of them are choosing to stay at home or have gone to their hometowns, etc. So it is a much smaller fleet that we have to worry about to start with. Secondly, what we have said is that we have pushed a lot well before, we introduced contactless before COVID, and that's an important thing. Well before COVID happened, we said, let's do contactless. And so that's one. We've got temperature checks in place for the delivery partners. They've got to do, we've got partnerships with restaurants on hygiene and essentially temperature checking at the restaurants as well. And we have made sure that if our policies are such that there is zero economic incentive for anybody to be at work when he's suspecting anything. So this, even if there is common, let me put it this way, the number of Ds who have said, I think I have common cold and I'm going to go and get checked is obviously very high. And thankfully, many of them are just common colds, which is good. And I think that we have a policy in place to protect them, protect the consumers. Cashless, for example, is a big one. The exchange of cash, if it's not needed, why do it? So we've essentially shut down COD in most of the big cities just because of this reason, because people are digitally native and people are able to pay digitally. So it is a challenge, but we are doing it one step at a time. It's good that it's being done by both players because then it becomes an industry play. It's also good that the restaurants are fully cooperating and actually leading the way in many ways on this topic. So all in all, I think it's slowly moving, much slower than we would all like, but it is moving in the right direction. And consumers are reacting by placing faith in the ordering system. We do have orders.
Yes, I want to talk about the orders that are coming in just a bit, but just to address the issue that you raised, and people, you know, Gaurav, let me understand from you on what is happening on that front. As Vivek was pointing out, currently you're operating with thin, lean teams, and the assumption or the hope is that as this lockdown starts to lift, the workforce will get back to normal or some degree of normal functioning. Now, given what we've seen happen with labor across different sectors, how big a concern is that for companies like yours?
Jane, I would say every step that we take, even going forward, I would say for not just weeks and months, and some of these will be permanent changes. I think the ability to be able to implement these measures and get compliance across the board and keep improving these measures will actually determine how fast things come back. And as I said, some things would come back faster than others. For example, when we look at our delivery business, then it will start to come back much sooner than even a dining out business. Having said that, I think proactive steps are required wherever we can to make sure we are able to change the way of life and incorporate these safety and hygiene measures into what we do.
Yeah, no, I wasn't just talking about safety and hygiene, Gaurav. What I was basically talking about is getting the workforce back, because what we're seeing across different sectors at this point in time, especially with people who were dependent on labor, which was coming in from different parts of the country, how much of a challenge is that going to be? This sort of fear psychosis that has been created, how much of that will be a challenge that you believe your workforce is going to have to deal with?
Absolutely, Shireen, and that's why my point comes in, where I'm trying to say that if these measures are in place and things start to get back to normal earlier than we could, then you would see more of these people come back. One, they'll have more confidence that they have a more safer environment to operate in. And secondly, there'll be some business which can actually pull them back into work. Similarly, as Vivek pointed out, grocery has been other arm.
Yeah.
So at this time, grocery is an essential service that everybody needs. We have so many users coming on our apps. Can we actually facilitate that for them? And that has also provided more business. It has catered to the needs of people, and the riders are also able to service those orders. So I think giving them a safe environment, a much safer environment to work in, giving that confidence again and again. And if you look at it, we would have delivered close to 1.5 crore orders in this COVID period. And I would say that given the fact that people are out there risking their health, delivering food and grocery, there are actually no cases where the COVID has been there for people who have actually taken food delivery or grocery, right? And that speaks for the food delivery companies, that speaks for the grocery companies who are out there and making sure these steps are there. And as business starts to come back, we'll be able to get these people back on board as well.
Okay, Vivek, 1.5 crore orders done during the COVID period. That's what Gaurav told us Zomato has been able to do. What about Swiggy? If you can give us some sense of the size, as well as a little bit more color on the ticket sizes that you're now starting to see in terms of orders.
Sure. I'm sure you're trying to eke out a market share number from me. We were bigger than Zomato.
I'll leave that to the two of you to work out.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, look, the number of orders is what the orders is. You've talked about, the numbers dropping to 1/3 really. So that's really not the true potential of the business. The reality is as follows, and just to your last point, Shireen, the Indian consumer and the workforce is incredibly sensible, at the same time is very resilient. If a zone has been declared a green zone, and that's what we think is going to happen through May and beyond, which means that it is actually safe and there's not been too much case remission, etc., then we do think that the ecosystem being the government and its associated bodies, private sector, as well as the people themselves, will get people to come back to work, because there is work to be done, there is demand and there is supply. So we do think it will happen. The question is, how soon does the country get from X% green zones to 100% green zones? Yeah. So we're looking at May and saying, okay, let's look at those green zones. A lot of districts have taken pride in the fact that there's not been any new cases or there's not been any deaths or anything of that sort. So those zones are obviously in the forefront to being green. If those green zones are places where food delivery and grocery delivery will operate, I do think that through a combination of government effort as well as private sector effort, you should start seeing orders come back. Because the reality is that there is, let me put it this way, even though the orders are down to 1/3 of what they were, the reality is the number of people who are coming in to try to order is well over double that. And this is on every single day. Now, we're not able to serve them because perhaps they don't see the restaurant of their choice still open, or because we're not open at that point of time. There are time restrictions in place, or because they choose not to take a risk with a certain type of cuisine, and so on and so forth. So there are reasons why consumers back off.
Okay.
And that number is giving us the confidence that, look, if 2x the number of people are coming in and kind of, wanting to place an order during these COVID times, we should see numbers bouncing back relatively quickly.
Okay, that's an interesting data point that you've given us, that that there is interest and there isn't fear that's holding back customers. What is holding back customers from actually executing those orders is the fact that the restaurant of their choice may be shut, or perhaps you're not able to deliver on that order. But Gaurav, Let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem and what we have seen, at least as far as restaurants are concerned. The restrictions continue pretty much across most parts of India, with the exception of takeaways and so on and so forth. Now, how concerned are you about the health of your restaurant partners if this prolonged lockdown were to continue?
So I think safety of users, safety of delivery partners, safety of restaurant partners, and of course, all our employees, I think it's paramount importance for all of us. And again, it goes back to the same thing. I don't think any one measure or any one part of the ecosystem can ensure that, and everybody needs to do their part. And everybody needs to do their part more proactively than just wait and watch, and hope definitely cannot be strategy. So even if I look at delivery and takeaway, as I said, I think that will start to come back, and there also restaurant partners need to implement much more measures, and I must say they've been very, very forthcoming and proactive in implementing these measures. As we make sure that these measures are getting implemented more, you will see more and more restaurant partners getting the confidence coming back. I think what we need as we go along, as we get more green zones or we get the restrictions coming down a little bit more, if more restaurants could operate, that'll actually help a lot.
Yeah.
One, to carry on with their business.
Yes.
And also serve the need of customers wherever they need food or grocery. Today, that is a challenge with only 25 to 30% restaurants operating. And if we can actually move that meaningfully, while making sure we're still maintaining the safety and the hygiene standards that we have, or even improving them, we could see a much better outcome for the restaurant ecosystem. And that's what we would like to work towards.
Okay, Vivek, the same question to you. How concerned are you that, we are probably going to see a significant shakeout within the restaurant ecosystem, and that is not necessarily going to be the best news for either you or for Gaurav, but no sign at this point in time for business to resume as normal. So how worried would you be?
Look, I'd be lying if I say I'm not worried about the ecosystem. It is a very large employer. It is also a very large part of the urban ecosystem. And therefore, rightly so, it's a large sector that would need help to come back on its feet. It has obviously been battered both in terms of dine-in as well as in terms of dine-out or takeaway. So I think one step at a time. If we are essentially able to get them first to start operating, and get them to be able to get some cash flows back, then I think that any restaurateur is a fighter. At the end of the day, it's not easy to be a restaurateur. I have met a lot of them, and I know that it's tough. So I think if we were to if the ecosystem, that's us plus the government and other people, are able to help out in getting them back on their feet, then I think we'll be looking at it 6 months from now and saying, wow, that's pretty amazing. There's so many of them that we thought are going to go under. And some unfortunately did, but realistically, many of them actually came back. And what a story, what a comeback story. I would like to believe that that's the outcome we should all aim towards over the next sort of 6 to 9 months.
Yes, that certainly is the outcome that we would like to hope for. But Gaurav, let's talk a little bit about what this could mean in terms of financial stress. And we're seeing that across the board. Large companies announcing pay cuts, some announcing layoffs as well. We're seeing that in the startup ecosystem. What is it going to mean, for instance, for you?
Shireen, I think it's going to be, it's the same answer for all of us. As organizations, we have to be fitter. We have to move towards profitability to be self-sustainable, and I think that's the objective for us as well. So I think everything we're doing right now is to make sure that at one point we're able to serve the needs of people and help out the ecosystem as much as we can through the various initiatives that we've been able to pull through for daily wages, restaurant partners, our delivery partners, but at the same time also making sure that we are running our operations as tightly as we can and moving towards profitability, because that's the right way to move forward. Of course, it makes it even more challenging in these times, but if we do the right actions proactively, I think we should be able to get there once things start to come back in 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, but in this 6 to 9 month period, what is it that you will have to do in terms of cost rationalization? Will it mean significant cuts? Will it mean layoffs? And also, what is the burn rate that you're currently having to deal with?
So our burn rate has been coming down significantly over the last, even before COVID, for the last 18 months. Yeah. Our focus was to do efficiently grow, and our burn rate had come down to much lower than what it was earlier. Having said that, right now also when we operate, we're trying to make sure that every cost is down. We haven't done any layoffs right now, but you can imagine it's very unpredictable right now in terms of when what would happen. So even sitting right now, we're talking about 6-9 months, but it could be that the revival might be much longer. So very difficult to say, Shireen, what would happen in the future. But right now, of course, we are doing whatever we can to make sure the costs are low, and we are trying to do what we have to.
Vivek, what are you going to do about costs? Are you being forced to look at rationalizing people at this point in time? What does the picture look like?
So obviously we had a scaling phase when we actually expanded to all these cities and so on and so forth. That was in the 2018-19 phase. And naturally after that, when any company reaches a scale which is at this point of time, we think it's right for the business, we need to now make the machine a little more efficient. We've been on that journey since September 2019. And so it's essentially a 6-month journey that we are in. And actually, I'm happy to say that even before COVID, a lot of that investments were done to basically cut unnecessary costs. We also found that naturally, because of the way the competitive landscape moved, that we were able to run the business at much lesser discount levels. We weren't anyway the sort of prime movers of the crazy discounts. So we were very happy when that came down to more rational levels. There are also areas we rationalize in terms of the leakage that happens in terms of unnecessary cancellations and unnecessary escalations to call center. You'd be surprised on a business our size how much leakage is there after the orders if the order has just not been a good order in terms of causing a cancellation or a bad food experience. So we've actually focused a lot on things that don't compromise from the core customer promise, which is to say, look, great food in a restaurant nearby delivered to you in 30 minutes. And that's really something we've tried to preserve the customer experience. So I'm sort of very happy to say that even before COVID, our investors were happy with the trajectory of the burn from the September to March period. And COVID now, of course, has thrown up a new set of challenges.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that right now we are in the middle of the war. And I think we should wait till the war ends and there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the clarity of how do we operate. What's grocery going to be like, what's food going to be like, how's it in the red zones, the quarantine zones, how's it like in the green zones. Only really when we know where you'll be operating, can you then decide what to right size, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. But do you have enough? You talked about being in the middle of a war, but do you have enough ammunition at this point in time? Vivek, you raised, what, $43 million from Tencent and Samsung in April. So given the uncertainty that you're dealing with at this point in time, do you believe that you have enough ammunition in the war chest?
That's right. I mean, I'm sure you've been following our fundraisers, and over the past, we've always believed in basically being prudent with cash in the bank. So I do believe that we have enough. The good thing is we have enough to operate. We don't have to worry about blowing it in a discounting war. That's not happening. So I would say we're comfortable where we are, but we are looking forward to getting out of the uncertainty so that we can decide what to do and when to do.
Very quick follow-up on that. You've probably seen the FDI amendments that have come in, and there is now going to be a greater scrutiny of investments coming in from China. Does that concern you? Does that worry you, Vivek?
No, we've always believed in a very, we've had a very diverse set of folks evincing interest in our company, and that's been true even before 2018. So the fact that we have such diversity, literally every continent has evinced interest in us over the last couple of years. So given that we have a lot of diversity of people who are interested in this business, I wouldn't say that news was particularly worrisome.
Okay. Gaurav, are we likely to see more consolidation in this business? There's been a lot of talk around you and grofers, and I know that both sides have come out and denied that news, but are we likely to see much more consolidation given the pain and the difficulty that the business is likely to see?
Shane, as companies move forward, of course, there is a possibility of consolidation happening in any industry. As companies move forward, there are bigger companies, there are smaller companies. But I think what you will see right now is that when the times get even tougher, the fitter and the fittest actually survive.
Yes.
And I think it'll challenge everyone to the maximum extent that they've never been challenged before. So I would say if companies keep operating well and finding answers to the solutions proactively, they'll get to where they want to. But as a result of that, would you see any consolidation? Possibly, but hard to predict.
Hard to predict. So what are people ordering, gentlemen? Let me start by asking you, Gaurav, what is the most ordered item at this point in time in these COVID times?
So, Shireen, I must say, and I want to also stress this to the users, we've always been saying that these are times where it's very difficult to completely eliminate any exposure to any risk, right? So if you're only if you were growing your own food and cooking your own food, you would be completely isolated. But if you're not, then there is some exposure there, of course. And we're trying to minimize as much as we can. So we've always been telling our users, please order grocery, please order food whenever it's a need, because we want to minimize as much as we can even these times. But having said that, people are ordering what they used to order mostly. But I would say it's mostly basic needs than anything else than you would see in other times.
Comfort food, Vivek, is that something that people are going for during this difficult period?
Hot comfort food is the operative word. Everybody is picked on the fact that the virus doesn't survive heating. So people are essentially ordering the hotter the better. And because in general, things like pizzas, etc., go in at 200, 250 degrees Celsius, that's going all right. Obviously, comfort food, as you're absolutely right, hot khichdi. So there's a lot that's being ordered, which is hot. But interestingly, also, there's a lot of snacks being ordered, which I suggest people are just stuck at home and saying, you know what, I feel like ordering something, let me order a snack, even though the main meal is going to be made at home.
So what's work for home been like for the two of you? Have you been up at night figuring out logistics, passes, how many people out on the roads, what's going on with various agencies? Vivek, let me start by asking you, have you worked this hard in your career so far?
Well, yeah, when I was young, I was working much harder because then I was literally 24/7, there was no break. But to answer your question, here's one funny means of figuring out how hard I'm working. My phone was charged once a day in the pre-COVID era, now it gets charged 3 times a day.
Gaurav, how often are you charging your phone?
It would be very similar, Shane, I think for all of us. But I must say, there's always a positive side to these things as well, right? So I think at some level, we're working harder because you're working remotely and you want to actually make sure things still happen. And there's so much to solve for. At the same time, I think it's more efficient as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you exactly know what you have to do. People are mostly there on time for whatever they have to do. First 2-3 weeks, everybody was figuring out what this means. But I think it started to become like clockwork for people. So there's, of course, some good sides to this as well. Of course, the social element of working with people, getting energized with people and working with them, you miss that a little bit. But I think hopefully we'll get back to that at the right time. But this is working fine for now.
All right, gentlemen, we wish you the very best of luck. Thanks for joining us and explaining to us how you've been able to get business going during this difficult period, what it could mean for the food delivery business going forward, the many initiatives that both Zomato and Swiggy have put in place to ensure that we can continue to order in during this difficult period. Vivek and Gaurav, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on Young Turks. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this special broadcast. Don't go anywhere. The news will continue on CNBC-TV18.